open up and make up your mind that you want to be better. That these are the discussions that take place. Hello, I'm Pastor Anthony Rollins, lead pastor of Celebration Church located here in Franklin, Virginia. I'm also the proud host of Grace to Celebrate podcast. Today, I am so excited about the guest that we have on our podcast today. We're going to talk about recovery today, recovery from substance abuse. We're going to talk about a plethora of information that we firmly believe will not only help individuals, but will also impact the lives of families. So right now, I want to introduce my guest that we have today to share with you in this podcast about recovery. To my right is Mr. Raymond Barnes, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raymond Barnes. That's my government name, my teacher name. If you came here and asked for Raymond Barnes, you probably wouldn't find me. But if you came here and asked for Todd Barnes, everybody know who I am. A little bit about myself. I'm a recovering addict in active recovery with 5,723 days. That's a little over 15 years. But none of that really means anything. Recovery is based on one day at a time, one moment, 1 minute. And through my story, I found that out the hard way. Because early on in my addiction, and through looking at other people who are doing it, I thought I could just walk up to somebody and rub them and recovery would happen by osmosis, but I found out it doesn't work that way. I had to put in the work. I need to tell you, 2003, February 6th, I was 162 pounds, laying on a cold floor in a year-long detox in Louisville, Kentucky. And that's when I decided that I'd had enough. I decided I was done. I decided I had, been through every single nightmare that I could have in my head. I must tell you also, I'm not a very religious person. I'm a spiritual person in that I treat people the way I want to be treated. But I do know this, in this recovery, in my recovery, if you miss the spiritual part, you miss the whole thing. So the big book tells me that to pray constantly, and that's what I do. I have a God of my understanding, and I found through recovery that God didn't leave me, because a lot of people like me who are in recovery, we come in, we're mad at the whole world, including God, because we prayed and we thought our prayers weren't answered. Found out though, prayers were answered, I just wasn't in a position to receive them. And did I really want them to be answered? So, long story short, because my story is a long story, it's a daily story, it's an ongoing story, and it will be. I look at it in phases. That phase was the phase where here I am, 6'4" athlete, growing up in Queens, New York, playing ball, playing football and all this good stuff, a lot of accolades, but at the same time, the oldest in my family, and got a beating for every one of my 4 siblings. So that added to me not wanting to do anything wrong. I tried to be perfect, and I fell short, as you can imagine, on a lot of things. But what I've learned is that there's not perfection. We're all imperfectly perfect at anything that we do. So my path led me down some dead end roads to all kinds of drugs. I didn't find my drug of choice, which happens to be cocaine. But anything that'll make me feel different than what I'm feeling, I'll try. So that just happened to be my choice. And the way I found that choice was through a guy. He told me, if I had everything in this world to get high on, I put it on the ground, which would you go to first? That's how you find your drug of choice. That doesn't mean that's what you stick with. That means that's the first thing that you go to. And mine is cocaine. I tried it, I loved it. I started out recreationally back in the late 70s and early 80s. We used to wear a brown jug around our neck with spoons because it was accepted. Everybody did it, so I thought. And, here I am, a guy who, overachiever, military, DC corrections, DC Superior Court, child support enforcement, eligibility. These are my careers. I was a correction officer. and I was getting high, taking count. So all of these things, overachieving at them and getting high, the same thing, and I crossed that imaginary line from enjoyment to having to have, living to use and using to live, no matter what, no matter the consequences. Didn't care about it. Earlier, someone said, my name is this, but unless I get arrested, then it's something else. I'm allergic to getting arrested today. I do things the right way. I got kind of upset last week at my sister because I got a ticket going to her house. I haven't had a ticket in 6 years, so I blamed her. Because if I wasn't going to her house, I wouldn't have got the ticket. But today, it's a lot of enjoyment. Life is enjoyable. The addiction process, which includes the holistic view of families and families first and families foremost. I think that's a missing part of the whole process of addiction, because as I get well, my family gets well. As I go, my family goes. So really, recovery is not about drugs and alcohol. That's just symptoms of what the actual root of the problem is. The problem is much, much deeper than that. That's just what we use to mask the problem. And I became very, very good at masking the problem. Like I said, I haven't had jobs. I've had careers. Actually, careers. I'll be 60 years old December 31st. And I worked at Union Camp back in 1984, making $86,000 a year. In 1984, and could have retired and didn't. And I met a guy at the store a couple weeks ago. He said, "Man, I remember you. We used to work at Union Camp together. I've been retired now for 20 years." And I was like, wow, that could have been me. But then again, I think that's not my path. I remember my father telling me, he said, boy, once you find something that you love to do, and you find a way of getting paid at doing it, you'll never work a day in your life. Ironically, it took me to become an addict to come full circle to that, because that's what I do today. My life is recovery. I work in recovery. I got some attaboys. I was scared for a long time to toot my own horn. Not today. If I don't pat myself on the back, who's gonna pat me on the back? It starts with me. I shared a quote the other day by one of my favorite basketball players about being role models. We don't know when we're role models. It's not up to us who considers us a role model. And today I just do the next right thing. It may not always be the next best thing. I do the next right thing and let the chips fall where they may. We were talking earlier, preparing for this about certain steps. My steps is staying out my own way. I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to this. But I also understand doing recovery that I have to suit up and show up every day. Life shows up every day. I gotta show up with it. I can't take any time off, so in short, that's a little brief synopsis of my story. What I can say to anyone who's thinking about it, anyone who's going through anything, please don't suffer in silence. Please let someone know. The way I believe is to do better, you gotta know better. I believe you gotta know better first, then you can do better. You can't do better if you don't know better. So that's a little bit about Raymond Barnes.
Wow. And so, as you can see, this is going to be a very enlightening episode on Grace to Celebrate. And so we want to thank Mr. Barnes for that short synopsis of his story. We'll get much, much, much deeper into his story as well and go through that journey with him. To my left, we have Mrs. Iny Weaver, and we want her to introduce herself as well.
I'm Iny Weaver, and I am excited. Somebody said earlier that we might not have enough energy. I got all the energy. I'm over here trying to keep myself still because I am pumped. And thank you so much for sharing, Raymond. I am awed, and I am so thankful. I know I'm not even supposed to be saying this right now, but I'm so thankful. I have barely even brushed elbows with you, and you have had such an impact on my life already. It's amazing. I'm trying to be just like you.
Wow.
So I'm from Southampton County, so not far from where I'm sitting right now. And I don't live around here anymore. I live in Pocosa now. And when I was on my way here today, I got off over there on the South Street. And when I was coming down, I saw Thomas Street and all these memories. It's only a matter of time for you to mess up because that's what you always do, you know. And so it was just this vicious cycle, you know, jails, you know, and long term. Like, it wasn't like, oh, you're going to jail for a week. Like, they sat me down and, you know, so it was not pretty. I have 6 children and their ages vary greatly. I have a 23-year-old, 18-year-old, a 15-year-old, an 11-year-old, and 4-year-old twins. And I've been clean for 8 years. This past July 6th was 8 years. So that tells you those children, all of them except for the twins, have experienced me in active drug use. And it was not pretty. You know, I don't have like a nice story. I don't have a, well, I would never put my kids through that, or I would never do that. There was no line I wasn't willing to cross. Like, I was the addict that, you know, took my children to score with me. I was the addict. I wasn't leaving them home alone, but I wasn't gonna not go use either. So y'all getting y'all's car seats because we're about to go over here to Portsmouth or wherever the place was. And so again, it led me into this cycle, you know, all these jails and just nonsense. And I totally destroyed my family, lost custody of my kids. Went to a long-term rehab. In 2008, I did 12 months in jail and 12 months at an inpatient facility. And in that facility, I don't want to say that I found God because that sounds so cliche. Because God ain't lost and never has been lost. But I knew God growing up, you know, when I was coming up. I knew who God was and I had faith. I was just lost, right? But in this program, it was a God-based program. And so this whole 12 months, I was working on my relationship with God, you know, or in some settings, they would call it a higher power. And so something changed while I was there, right? So I got out and I was like, well, I'm not going back to my hometown. I'm gonna go somewhere different. I'm gonna do something different, right? Give myself a fighting chance. And so I started all over with nothing. From there I went to a transitional house and rode a city bus for the first time in my whole life. Got me a job, you know, and I stayed clean for 4.5 years. And then my mom died. And when she died, about 10 days later, I went right back to using drugs because that's what, I didn't have those tools in place. Or maybe I did have the tools. I may have had the tools and just wasn't willing to pick them up. Because a big part of my story wasn't that I didn't know the right and wrong thing to do. Because oftentimes I knew what to do and I knew what not to do. And oftentimes I had a support network. And all the time I knew I had God. But I didn't have a willingness. I was not willing to do what needed to be done. I didn't want to put in the work. It was easier, more comfortable for me to just go back to what was so familiar to me. And so now it's a all the time prayer that I just continue to have this spirit of willingness, right? Because man, that I am so impulsive. Even today, I'm so impulsive. Recovery does not take away anything. Like I said earlier, at the time I thought that my problem was drugs, but what I know now is that I had been my problem all along. That was just a problem for society. That was a problem for y'all. That was a problem for the district across the street. But my problem was bigger than that. And so today, I'm still impulsive. We were talking earlier about getting out of our own way and self-sabotage. Man, I still struggle with that today. I'll shoot myself in the foot in a minute. Oh, this is fantastic. Everything's going great. This is so lovely. I got this wonderful husband. He dotes on me. Man, man, I will shoot myself in the foot in a minute. And I don't know why I'm like that. But one thing I know is that it's a process, right? We were talking about that earlier too. Layer and layer and layer keeps coming off. And I feel so hopeful that as long as I'm not using a substance, I got a shot at working on everything else, right? I have a shot because I put that fire out. So now I can work on this. And then once I have that under control, then I can work on something else and work on something else. And in the meantime, hopefully give somebody else some hope, give somebody, just some hope and some belief in themselves. Because I have really counted myself out. And I know so many people have counted me out too. And it's never too late. There's never, you're too far gone, too much damage, never. If you still got breath in your lungs, there is still a shot. You can turn it around. You can turn it around. And that's pretty much.
That's great.
That's some pretty amazing stuff. The one thing that I think we see is addiction is not prejudice. Obviously, we have an African American male and a Caucasian female who have riveting stories about their journey. And think about this. We've only gotten thus far a snapshot of that journey. And so you heard Mr. Barnes share that his drug of choice was cocaine. And you heard Mrs. Weaver say that her drug of choice was heroin. And so what drove you to drugs? What is it that you think pushed you into doing that? Now, I know you hit on it some, right? But what do you think it was something that pushed you into that direction? Can you identify that?
Yes, I've had years and years and years to think about it.
Okay.
Because in recovery, any man or woman who forgets where they come from is doomed to return. So that means I had to learn, I had to research what's going on with Ray. Not with anybody else, but with Ray. My father was right here in Southampton County on Pretlow Street. It was Pretlow Farm.
Mm-hmm.
He hitchhiked to New York when he was 9 years old. Self-made man, alcoholic. Back in the day, they didn't have the 5 types. He was just an alcoholic. And the thing is, what I promised myself growing up was, because I saw him physically abuse my mom. Mind you, I'm 6'4". My father was 5'4", my mother was 5'3". So this little bitty man would come in drunk every Friday after he get off work, put his check on the bureau, not the Chester drawer, but the bureau.
Yeah.
And mama would cash it and he would beat mama. So my thing was, as the oldest, I'm never gonna do that. I've never drank. And that was the reason, because of him. But what I did do was go to school, which was right at the corner. If you know anything about city, we have blocks. So at the end of the block, the school was there, and I found a bag of marijuana already rolled up, pre-rolled in top paper. And I started smoking, and I liked the way I felt. I felt different. I had a escape. Didn't know that I didn't know about anything. All I knew was I felt good. And I didn't have to drink to do it. So as time went on with me, going back and forth, we used to come down here, come to Franklin every summer. We called it coming down south for the summer. I have 4 friends throughout my whole life, and they all are from Franklin. We grew up together. We all went in at different times, military and corrections, and we played ball together. So the peer pressure of hanging out, and back in the day, we were talking about it earlier, how it was on South Street, you could hang out, and everybody was doing it, so I didn't think anything was wrong with it. What happens is, for me, what happened was, there was an imaginary line that was crossed. When I can't even tell you when I crossed that line. But just like Ms. Weaver said, one day I woke up and I was an addict. Throughout, here's a guy who worked at DC Superior Court wearing a London Fall jacket umbrella and briefcase, riding the train system to work. This guy was an addict and stayed up for 4 or 5 days making so much money, but I didn't have money from Friday to Monday. I had to mail myself half of my check.
Pause.
Because if I didn't, I was going to smoke it up.
Wow. Now, let's make sure we grasp.
Get all my money. This was when the ATMs first came out. They had no limit. You could go to any ATM and get all your money out. And I would get my whole check out, spread it out on the table. Okay, I'm gonna pay this. No, I'm gonna do a double up next week on him. Familiar, huh? No, okay, well, I'll do this. No. That went from, okay, this ain't gonna work no more. So, envelope, address it to myself, split the money up, put it in the envelope, drop it in the mail. I didn't think far enough ahead. Because Monday, guess where I was at?
Mailbox?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Mailman. Late.
Right.
To get that other. But that's where it took me. It took me to places I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And I don't have enemies. I don't blame anybody for anything. I have no enemies. But I wouldn't wish this on anyone. Active addiction. Because Ms. Weaver were just talking, and I'm sitting here thinking as she's talking, there's a lot of yets out there for me. I haven't done this yet. I haven't done that yet. But I'm quite sure that if I would have kept on the path that I was on, if God didn't see fit to intervene in my life with recovery, because that's what it was an intervention from God. It wasn't, no human power could relieve me of my alcoholism. So it's a God thing, and I know that, and I'm comfortable with that. And I know that if it was not for that saving grace, I could not tell you, I couldn't even imagine, because my mind had taken me to places where all I thought was the God of my understanding was gonna have me walking around spiritually, emotionally, and physically bankrupt. That's it, like a zombie. That's it, and I didn't care. I did not care, so that's what started it. It made the good feeling. That's what it was. One thing about it, and I want people to understand, recovery, I said it before, but recovery has nothing to do with drugs and alcohol. It has everything to do about how it makes you feel, the emotional side of it, the escape, because the bags that you have before you get high, they're still waiting when you come down. You gotta pick them up and carry them. They don't go anywhere.
Right.
So it's just that feeling. It's a temporary relief from all things.
Okay. Wow. Mrs. Weaver?
What was the question?
Basically, what drove you to start using? I know you mentioned some instances in your previous address, but is there anything that kind of pushed you over the edge? I know that this is what I'm going to do. I know you said you woke up one day and you were like, I think I'm an addict, right? And then I heard you say you immediately began to employ measures that would try to avert that, right? So talk about that. Like how, when you got to that point, why did you get to that point? Why were you willing to access it? Were you concerned about right or wrong, or just because of credible others, that were in your life, or how does that work? How did that look?
Well, I don't know where it came from or when it started, but because like Raymond, I've had many hours to think about why I am who I am, how it happened, why it happened. A lot of the rehabs that I was in, some of the people that would be there with me, they were all, abused or had some kind of traumatic childhood. And then I'm like, well, there's me. I had like pretty normal folks. I haven't had any, I don't have a reason to be this horrible of a person. That's how I felt, right? And so what I have figured out is that always, as far back as I can remember, I had this feeling of inadequacy, like just not good enough. Not,
Is that low self-esteem, lack of self-confidence, any of that, or just?
I think just a lack of self-worth, period, you know? And so I was always seeking validation. I was always, you know, I always wanted to be the cool girl. I always wanted to be the girl that all the dudes wanted to be with. I wanted to be the girl that made everybody laugh. Like I always was just seeking that validation. And so like I was saying, you know, before, me and my brother are really tight. And so I ended up in a circle of people that were doing things that I really shouldn't even have been around because I was too young to be around it, right? And it just opened the door and I ran through it, you know? And then, you know, I feel like I gotta say that almost immediately that there was like an internal conflict, if for lack of a better way of putting it, you know, because using really went against my morals and like who I wanted to be, like, you know, the values that I had. And so it was like this internal conflict. But it was just a battle within, you know. So I would say I cannot do this anymore. I cannot live like this, you know. I got suicidal, you know, and so I kept trying all these different means to fix it. But there is no easy fix. There is no pill or solution. There's nothing that's an overnight fix. You know, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. And for me, you know, I found a lot of solace in the 12-step fellowship, a lot. Because it's the one program that I went to that offered a guide, steps to like work through what I had going on internally, you know, to really take a look at me before the drugs, after the drugs. Right now, today, I got up this morning at 5:20 and writing on my step, you know, because I know I'm not exempt. I'm what they would call in the fellowship a chronic relapser, and I'm not exempt. So I want to make sure I stay on my game and stay diligent. And so I approach it from all sides. You know, I try and keep my prayer life in top notch. Try and, you know, like I try and dot all my I's and cross my T's because I don't want to get tricked up again. Right. I know that might not be the correct word, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to get tricked up again. I don't want to find myself because it's never, oh, well, you know what I'm going to do? I think I'm going to go shoot dope today. It's never that. What it is a little white lie, a little bit of deceit, one little area that I'm just leaving out, and my accountability don't know about it. And so I end up, I'm taking all these little teeny steps going this way, right? And then I'm way over here across this line wondering how I got there. Well, you took a whole bunch of steps to get there. That's how you got there. So, you know, that's how I make my decisions now. I try to, if I do this, is this going to take me closer to who I'm trying to be or who I used to be? I don't even know if I answered your question.
You did. That's very powerful, actually. Very, very powerful. Yeah. You know, who I aspire to be versus who I used to be. I think that's, in and of itself, merits an entire conversation. It is. You know, so yeah, I think you answered it fairly well. And, you know, it's amazing because what you guys show the world, what you show everyone is, if you make up your mind, that's the first thing you have to do. Then you're able to begin a process that starts today. Because the one thing that I hear both of you saying, if I'm not mistaken, is you've got to start and then you've got to keep going. And so for Mr. Barnes, it's now going on 15 years, and for Ms. Weaver now, it's going on 8 years, which are both tremendous. And I tell you, our conversation is just getting started. There's so much more that we're going to talk about in the lives of Raymond Barnes and Ina Weaver. We're going to get into, in our next episode, how it impacted their quality of thought, their quality of life. And then in the following episode, we're going to get into how they are sustaining, like how they are still in recovery and knocking it out of the park every day. And here's what I love about both of them, that both of them continue to share with us that we're doing this every day and we're careful to make sure that we continue to do it every day. That's important. Thank you so much for joining us today in Grace to Celebrate. Our promise to you is that episode number 2 will be just as powerful and riveting as it has been today. Take care.